Hi, friends. Thanks for joining me today as we continue in our Unfolding the Word studies. We're in the midst of our study in 1 Kings, our examination of the prophet Elijah, and looking at the topic of spiritual discouragement, spiritual depression. I'm going to begin reading today in a portion of the 19th chapter of 1 Kings that we've already been looking at, continuing to develop this topic on our behalf. Verse 1 of chapter 19. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all of the prophets with the sword. And then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he, meaning Elijah, was afraid, and he arose and he ran for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. And he left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, came and sat down under a broom tree, and he asked that he just might die, saying, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." And he lay down and he slept under a broom tree. We've been looking at the issue, as I say, of spiritual discouragement, depression, the reality of it happening in the life of a believer, the probability of it happening in the life of a believer, and the examples that are so frequent in the scriptures about it. In this study of the prophet Elijah, we've begun looking at some of the triggers for this discouragement and depression in a person's life. The things in a way that set us up, that cause the rug to be pulled out from underneath us, spiritually and emotionally speaking. There are four of these triggers that I want to look at. Yesterday we looked at the first of these, and that was the particular spiritual vulnerability that you and I have following a time of great blessing, following a time where God's hand was very clearly manifested in our life, in our ministry, in our family. We always need to be prepared for a letdown after the times of success. That being on the mountaintop, so to speak, doesn't keep us on the mountaintop, and we could readily be facing a valley type experience in our life. Let's look at the second of these triggers today. The second of the triggers that sets us up for discouragement, depression, that pulls the rug out from underneath us, is to find ourselves in a period of time where we are exhausted, either emotionally or physically or both. Exhaustion periods are dangerous periods for us. The 18th chapter of 1 Kings ends with these words. In verse 46 it says, "And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment, and he ran before Ahab all the way to the entrance to Jezreel," what was then operating as the capital city. After the Mount Carmel episode of chapter 18, Elijah had to be close to physical exhaustion. You remember it was the exhausting day. I described it to you yesterday. The duel on the mountaintop, Mount Carmel. The duel between the 450 prophets of Baal and Elijah standing on behalf of God. How after that duel had finished, then there was the supervision on the part of Elijah of the killing of the 450 prophets of Baal. Then there was the praying for the rain and the excitement that came with the rain after 3 years of drought finally coming, finally falling. It was a time of emotional and physical drain. Listen, Elijah wasn't a robot. He was a real person. All of these events took their toll on him as physically, spiritually, emotionally. Yet the 18th chapter ends with this note that I read to you. At that very point, after all of these exhausting events, Elijah makes the decision to run in front of Ahab, King Ahab, all the way to Jezreel, where Ahab's wife Jezebel was located, to personally confront the king and Jezebel with the defeat of the prophets of Baal, to confront them over their sin. Now, You probably don't know the geography of the area, but let me give you a geography lesson here. There was approximately 20 miles between Mount Carmel and Jezreel. About that far. Like a marathon run. Clearly, what was going on after this exhausting day, for whatever reason, Elijah then ran what was almost a marathon race all the way to the gates of Jezreel. Picture a person adrenaline driven. Picture yourself adrenaline driven. For whatever reasons, being in the manic phase of your life and moving forward past the limits. And now you're at a point of emotional, physical, spiritual collapse. That's the situation that was being faced by Elijah. He was worn out in all of those ways. And now, when a message came in from Jezebel that he was not expecting, he was ill-equipped to respond to it. Exhaustion impacts our attitudes and emotions. Allowing ourselves to go past the limits puts us in dangerous place. Be careful when we're exhausted. Don't let your adrenaline drive you to doing those things that set you up really for a major stumbling to come. Be careful when you're physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. That's trigger number 2. Trigger number 3, related to that, was we are particularly vulnerable to having the rug pulled out from under us and falling into depression, falling into discouragement when life changes unexpectedly. The circumstances of our life take an unexpected turn. Now, think about Elijah. After 3 years of being undercover, he finally has this dramatic episode in chapter 18 on Mount Carmel. It was a time where, after being sought after, having to be protected, he finally is out in front of all of the people and God shows his hand dramatically. He had changed into a victor from being the hunted one. Now, a few hours later, he ends up at the gates of Jezreel, having turned from being a victor into the victim. I don't think he was expecting that. I can't imagine how he would. I'm sure, because he's a real person like you and I are real people, if I had been on Mount Carmel experiencing that great time of victory, my assumption would have been this is the start of true victory across all of the land. The prophets are dead. The enemies are going to roll over or flee. Let's go to the front. Let's win. And he was not expecting. How could he have expected that when he comes, he discovers that King Ahab and Queen Jezebel don't roll over and play dead? They now seek after him. They now threaten his life. In fact, say you'll be dead tomorrow. You're going to be like the prophets of Baal. He assumed Mount Carmel marked the change of everything. Now he discovers, oh, wait a second, not everything's changed. Unexpectedly, life still has obstacles to it. The time of victory did not mean easy road. Had to have shocked him, had to have confused him, and he was exhausted as it occurred. Be careful during unexpected changes in circumstances. Things you're not expecting. Circumstances suddenly, unexpectedly turn bad in your ministry, in your church. Circumstances, situations suddenly turn bad in unexpected ways in your family, in your work setting. Your health suddenly, unexpectedly takes a turn for the worse. Maybe you've had an accident, maybe you get an illness. Unexpected changes. Such unexpected changes can easily knock the wind out of us, knock the wind out of the sails of the boat, so to speak. And they set the stage for personal disaster. They set the stage for drifting into that point where now we are overcome by the emotions and attitudes of discouragement and depression. Beware of unexpected changes in circumstances. Watch out for physical, emotional exhaustion. Watch out for unexpected changes. You're vulnerable during such times. Pray for yourself. Have others pray for you. You pray for them as these triggers inevitably arise in everyone's life. Well, join me tomorrow and we'll look at the fourth of these triggers that we see demonstrated here in the life of Elijah that set the stage for the discouragement. God bless.